I think this is it. Like, I really, really felt like my lights were going out. We lost one of our friends to a heroin overdose. That was absolutely crazy. In my class, I had almost a perfect GPA, but behind the scenes, I was always trying to fill that void of acceptance. He was verbally abusive. My dad used to tell me stories. He would roll them up in carpets. And that's when I realized that my faith was not my own. You hear churches say, like, welcome home. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, I'm home. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Act Like Men podcast. Today we're getting into my story. So we're going to be going into messy times in my life and how I've overcome fear of man and needing to be accepted by people. We're going to get into some things that, just looking at me now, you probably would never guess, but praise God, He has brought me out of so much. So I hope that you enjoy this. If you do enjoy it, please hit that like button, share it. We have a big goal to impact as many kingdom men as we can to take back from Satan what he's taken from a lot of men that are believers. So here we go.
Nah, man, this is testimony, baby.
Fair. I feel like mine's been put off for a while, so I've been thinking about it a lot, which is good. Yeah. But I want to say this, like we gave a disclaimer around your story, right? We have the unique position of everyone in our lives that we're talking about being here and present, still with us. So for me, it's just super important to make sure that everything I'm saying is honoring. And, I think I'm learning from being a dad now, especially too, that the lens that I had on a lot of things growing up was slightly skewed, just slightly.
It's so humbling. Facts.
It really is. I was thinking about this morning as I was pouring my coffee. I'm like, I don't think there's a day within the past month that I haven't sat like in bed at night and just been like, wow, I definitely would have changed how I approached X, Y, and Z with the girls or, with Nat or whatever. So it's just like, there's never 100%, perfection in the day. So, I'll say this. So I was, born into a house with a lot of people in it. So I had my mom, my dad. We had my great-grandmother who came over from Poland during World War II. She got rescued off of a German farm where she was working as, I'll say not an assistant, I don't know. She was just, doing their farm tasks, whatever that, farmhand, I guess.
Farmhand, yeah.
Exactly. So that was a really interesting, unique experience growing up with her in there. And I think that definitely set the tone of the house in a lot of ways because she was very much post World War II type of grandma, if that makes sense. Very, very loving woman, but also very like stoic. Yeah. Very cold. She was a gardener. She gardened until like the day that she died. She wound up passing away from cancer and didn't tell anybody when she found out. So we all found out right at the end. She was just like that old school mentality. I remember growing up and being scared of the wooden spoons in the drawer because that was like the tool of discipline, of choice, at that point. And we had her daughter, so my grandmother, in the house as well. So mom, dad, great-grandma, grandma, and then also my uncle lived. So we had a 3-story house, well, including basement. So I grew up kind of in that environment where we had a lot of people. Even my uncle had a relationship at that time. So that woman, her daughter. So that's really where things kind of started. And you'll hear a lot in my story, I'm sure, that relationship traumas and issues and things along those lines have always been something that's kind of marked my family story. And the earliest example that I can remember of that, well, I'll say at 6 years old, that was kind of the first significant marker in my life. And that was when my parents got divorced, not for the first time, not for the second time, but for the third time. Wow. Yeah. So very unique situation. I've yet to meet anyone whose parents divorced each other 3 times.
Yeah.
They were married to each other 3 times.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So they were married and divorced to each other 3 times before you were the age of 6.
Correct. So when I was 6, that was the last one. They knew each other very young, we're former New Yorkers. So they met in Brooklyn. and grew up together. And I think it was one of those stories, and I'll talk about this in my testimony too, the effective power of mentorship and, having guidance spiritually. I think that they really wanted to make things work. I think they just didn't know how and kept running into the same patterns. And as I've done the work too, post salvation, of like looking into generational curses and bloodline stuff, and even like we hear about epigenetics today and how that plays into a factor. None of this stuff was known. So I think they just kept running into family history type of stuff, that they couldn't necessarily figure out a way through at that point. So life was really solid for me growing up until that point. And I do remember getting that news at 6. It was like probably a month before Christmas or so. And I remember getting sat down, and it was, hey, mom and dad are, we'll still be with you, but we won't be together in the way that we know our family right now. And I just remember like, I don't really understand what that means. I can't really process that.
Sure.
And how that goes. But in a way, looking back on it, it almost wound up being a relief too, because at that point, the level of dysfunction in the house was really high. And I remember it kind of being like, what's today going to be like? What am I going to experience today? So never that there wasn't love, that I have always felt. I had a relationship with my dad where he was a long, what is that called? Like a long road or, I don't know, long distance trucker. So he would be out sometimes weeks at a time. He drives the big truck, tons and tons and tons of material across the country. But whenever he was back, he was always, present. And I remember even young sports games and stuff like that, he was always there. But I think that created like a big rift in my parents' relationship as well, and I know my mom felt a certain way about that, but also now feeling the same way as a man too. I understand the desire to want to provide, and I think that was the best way that he understood how to do that at the time. But, as I was looking back kind of on this story and things, I remember one of the things that stuck out to me was there was just like a real escalated argument kind of towards the end, and we were in the middle of a remodel. So we had like a bathtub, like the shell of the actual tub, in my kitchen / like dining room area, outside of the bathroom, because we were taking the old one out, putting it in. And when I say we, I wasn't doing anything at that age, but there was a phone that got thrown physically because of the, height of the argument, or the fever pitch, I guess, of it. And, I remember looking at my parents and I was like, well, I guess if I was like a little bit of a better baseball player at this point, maybe I could have caught it, and like trying to use humor to deflect, what was happening.
You're 6?
Right.
Ish?
Yeah. I was like 6-ish around that time.
And you already were developing that coping mechanism of using humor to like mask a difficult situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Which makes a lot of sense now that I know you.
Right.
That's I see that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big thing that I've had to work through later on in adult years, is actually being able to like sit and kind of confront some of the things that have happened, and I guess become okay with the idea that like things were painful, some things were tough, some things were hard to process, and not just whitewash over it and go into, I don't want to say fix it mode, but not even that, just, I think you understand where I'm going with that, but acknowledge what happened.
I don't want to jump in too early on your story, but one of the things that comes to my mind is that could one of the relational challenges be that for your parents was that your dad was gone so much and your mom was not really geared that way? Like I know for Amy and I, we talked about my story that I tried to get into the Navy. Well, you're gone for 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
Amy would just have never been able to handle that life. She would never be able to handle me being deployed for 6 months at a time. Yeah. So was there do you know if there was an aspect of where your dad being gone 1, 2, 3 weeks at a time was so difficult on your mom? Yeah. Or do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine probably because of the state of things that maybe it was a little bit of both. This is just conjecture here. I haven't spoken with my mom about it, but I would imagine maybe there was a bit of that. And then there was probably also a bit of like, I know things are calm, when they didn't have the opportunity to be going at each other.
Sure.
Right. So that's possible there. But I think that's, something that definitely played a factor into it. And I did speak with my parents about this, in their long history of relationship. There was some infidelities in the marriage as well. And I think that probably played a factor in multiple of those divorces and living in the wake of that,
Yeah, I'd imagine that would be really, really hard if there was infidelity and then you get divorced and then you reconcile.
Yeah.
And then there's infidelity again, maybe on the other side of the relationship, and then things implode all over again. And then you're like, well, we'll pick up the pieces again for the sake of the family and because we believe in marriage. And then, and I'm not poo-pooing one way or the other.
No,
It's one of those things where infidelity is one of the most damaging things in a relationship.
Yeah.
And so that being a factor, I could imagine that it was very, very volatile because apart from Christ, it's so hard to be able to genuinely forgive and
100%.
move forward.
Yep. Well, this is something that, I think was a theme in my relationship, specifically after my parents got divorced. What I've kind of uncovered from counseling in the years is that with we'll talk about, my dynamic with my dad, but my dynamic with my mom kind of became the inverted parent, right? Where a lot of our relationship was me hearing and listening to the things that,
Right.
Your
counseling mom.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
And
That's tough.
yeah, somehow that felt good and right to be doing in the moment, and even to this day, I have a really hard time with anybody not feeling great in the moment. Right. And that's just like kind of hardwired into me. And
you don't want people to sit in discomfort because
Yeah.
of you, essentially, or
not even because of me, just in general.
okay.
Yeah, he wants to fix it. Yeah, I did the same. I did the same thing. I remember very specifically doing like marriage counseling with my mom and my dad when I was 12.
Yeah.
How broken do you have to be to be looking to a 12-year-old for advice?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
Were you an only child too?
Yeah. That's good.
So
call.
you were the only like rounding wire in this electrical circuit for them, because
Essentially.
they only had each other to go at, and you were there. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had siblings, I'm sure that responsibility would have gotten spread out a little bit.
Yeah.
For worse, probably.
Yeah,
Because now
I would
there's more
imagine.
children traumatized.
Right.
But
Yeah, it was interesting being like an only child because I think that's why I wound up being so close to my parents in a lot of ways. Because we had a very unique kind of like custody setup, which was a blessing. And I appreciate that my mom did this too, but we split, or they split the time with me 50-50 evenly. So I think it was Mondays and Wednesdays I was at my mom's house. She lived about 15 minutes from my dad. Tuesdays and Thursdays I was at my dad's. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday of every other week I would rotate to their house. So I was on different buses at school. The holiday schedule was like every other holiday. We flip every year. So Christmas one year with dad, meant Christmas next year with mom. So it was very amicable, actually, which is something that I do appreciate because I know a lot of times, especially when we talk about fatherhood and guys having guys in their life or not having their father present, right? That's one thing we see is there was a divorce and then mom kept me away from dad, never got to have that relationship. And then, you're looking to women for advice on how to be a man, or you're going to find advice from men that are in gangs or, whatever, right? Like not good. So I got to grow up with my dad being, pretty present, which was good in a lot of ways, not perfect, but things were, good, especially towards the later part of our relationship. But yeah, I remember that first walk up into our apartment. My mom, we moved into I want to say it was about 650 square foot apartment. Somebody, from the church that we started going to, He had a house, and then a whole like I don't want to say attic apartment, but it was like a detached upstairs area. And that's the environment that I grew up in for the next 15 years, basically. I would say, and then back and forth to Dad's house. So definite difference there. When I look at who I am today, I see kind of both homes almost like taking root in positive and negative ways. So, when I was in that environment, it taught me, unfortunately, like poverty mentality. Like when we walked in there were no carpets on the floor. It was like, what is like not even the finished wood, but almost like plywood itself.
The really thin plywood type stuff.
Yeah. I'm losing the word, but almost even less than that. But there were still like nails sticking up out of the floor because it was unfinished. And when we walked in to see it, I remember this distinctly. It was the first time I've ever seen like a mini refrigerator. Because I guess they weren't that popular. Like that's what was there, up to that point. And I was like, what the heck is this? This is like a half, a half experience of what we had at my dad's.
Wow.
So it was kind of like that. Like all the rooms were almost touching each other. And, when I look back on the journey, I think because of my mom's position as a woman who is now divorced, she was a bus driver, but you're only going to make so much income. Mm-hmm. And that kind of flavored my understanding of wealth, finances. I remember when I was there, and in the years after, I felt afraid. Like we weren't going to have enough. We were going to run out.
Sure.
Yeah. And there were times where I do remember very specifically, like we did run out, food was like, not that I was not fed, but it was like down to the very last bit of food in the house. I remember hearing about bills a lot, like, I don't know if we're going to be able to make rent this month or what have you. Man,
that opens like a whole other conversation, right? Of like, as parents, where do you shield your kids from the difficulty? And where do you share with your kids the difficulty that you're going through so that they can,
see you overcome
and
be human in it too.
Right. So there is that balance. And I think a lot of households have very, very different opinions on that.
You've done both, right? Because you guys have gone through some hardships and.
Yeah. When we went through what we went through 8 years ago, we shared with the boys because it's like, hey, God's going to deliver us. But there are other things that we shielded them from because that's what we felt like we needed to do. And I don't think there's like a hard line of like, these are the things you share and these are the things you don't share. I think it's one of those things where you have to talk about it, come into agreement and decide what things to share and what things not to share. Because it sounds like to me, you carried a lot of burden for things that you had no control over and no way of doing anything about. And you're just that's just adding to the stress and anxiety of your childhood because you're like, I don't know if mom's going to be able to work, if mom's going to have a place to live because if mom becomes homeless, you can still live with dad. Yeah. But what's next after that,
Yeah. And I think it's in like what you're talking about. It's like, who are you pointing to as the source in the story? Like in your example of what you and Amy went through, you guys were well established in your faith at that time. And I'm not saying obviously that's easy, even when we have well established faith, but at least you knew like God is going to cover us and to dig into that. And at that point, my mom really had just given her life to Christ at that point. We wound up going to like a local Lutheran church and she found community there post divorce, which was great in a way because it was obviously engaged her faith and she had that I don't know if it was a resurgence of faith or like that was her first time really giving her life to Christ. It was definitely a net positive, but at the same token I don't know that she really had her walk with God develop enough yet to know like he's going to get me through the valley because up until that point it was just I mean, you could look at her life probably for the past 2 decades, and it probably felt like valley, 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 valley.
Well, and what's
when it comes to the marriage
at that point? What's her image of what a man is?
Right.
Right. Based on track record, I don't obviously know anything about your mom's story, but I imagine that it's tough when all the image presented to you of a man is, you know, someone who's not always going to provide and always be there and take care. That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely hard. I can't imagine being in her position. And, you know, as I've like now become that head of household and what have you, start to feel that financial squeeze in life with kids, I could just imagine what that felt like for her. And knowing like in our careers, we obviously close business, we get commissions, you know, or in y'all's case, like you close new clients, you get more money. But like imagine being on a fixed bus driver salary where it's like, I know that's
brutal.
I'm locked in at a 50-cent raise per year, you know, probably for whatever. So I could imagine, you know, that could flavor your experience in life in certain ways. Were you going to say something? No. Yeah. So, you know, that's kind of the feeling that I had growing up in that household environment was.
So that was mom's, right?
That was mom's house.
Scarcity, stuff like that.
Now, we'll say just to close mom's house kind of chapter there, or the thoughts on it. My mom was extremely loving. She didn't have any issues as far as like, she wasn't a drug user. She wasn't a drinker. Her thing was really just around, will we be provided for? But she did have a very genuine faith where even to this day, I mean, I've seen her grow a lot in being able to understand and explain things like biblical concepts, right? But she just has one of those, like, you ever meet people with simple faith where it's like, I wish I wasn't tortured by the doubts in my mind. And like, I know so much, like language and culture and different things that opens up like wormholes in your head or rabbit holes of like, well, if maybe that's a valid criticism of the Bible. Now I have to go read this whole book to like, you know, figure out that it's not true.
Right.
Mom never had that. Mom was just always like, you know, I love Jesus. You know, she really grew in her prayer life and in her walk. Like we prayed every single night before bed. So those types of habits were good. But I do think it was very much like, if I could experience or describe that experience, it would be like a more white knuckle experience of like, I hope you get us out of this, God. But for a very long time, years and years. Now, on the flip side, my dad's house, when you go there, you would never know, you know, that there was financial challenges or anything like that, because again, it was essentially 3 micro families living together, right? So the house was, you know, on 3/4 of an acre, 6 or 8 car driveway, I guess probably even bigger than that, really. A lot of work done to the house. My dad and my uncle who lived there were both very skilled builders. So everything on the house was, you know, nice and what have you. But when I was there, I had the experience, especially in my early years, of really always feeling like I had to perform. And my dad, like your dad, was a military guy. He was in the Navy. He was in Japan multiple times, in Okinawa, and that's actually, I think, where a lot of the relational trauma, so to speak, came from. But those habits, that like rigidness kind of stuck with him, you know? So especially when I was a kid, I remember I got assessed kind of like you were talking about, Steve, got into the gifted and talented
both
program.
of you, for real?
Yeah.
So I'm just average.
Well, I would say that's probably wrong.
I talk out loud to myself. Doesn't that mean
that
I'm
makes
smart?
you smart? Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that a thing?
Yeah, but that is a thing, honestly.
Man, I got held back in 7th grade. I'm in the wrong circle.
That had to be application, not intelligence, though, because you're like legit one of the smartest people we know, I think.
For sure.
Yeah, but you know, with that, now that I look back on it, I think part of that was aptitude, and then part of that was I was afraid to be out of line with my dad. The expectation of like extreme performance was very high, where I would describe it like if I got an A, it was almost like, why wasn't an A plus? we would always say good job and stuff like that, but it was always that conversation. And to a degree now, I could even look at that and say, well, that might have been healthy also in a way. Maybe it was a conversation needed to be had differently. But like I could totally see that with Grace or with Kaya or, Noelle in the future, right? Just being like, okay, you did great. How do you think you could have done better? So that's something I'll have to wrestle with at that time.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation.
And I think we could talk about that in parenting episodes too. Like, how do you pull out the best without making it seem like you're not good?
Well, there's an element of balance too that's missing from your childhood of like having the dad and the mom together. Yeah. Because the mom really, like, my wife already calls me out and I love it, but she's like, hey, you need to like be sweeter in this area or encourage him and not just challenge. So when you're missing that balance.
Yeah.
Right. Like for Amy and I, one of the things that we would do with our kids is like, whether you're getting A's or B's or C's, we're fine with what your grades are so long as it's understood that you're doing your best.
Right. And I like that.
It's not about a number, it's not about a letter grade, it's about the level of genuine effort that's going into it.
Yeah.
That's what we have sought to do. Because it's not about achieving an external standard. It's about doing your personal best in whatever area it is. Like for me, math and science was extremely strong, but English and history was not. I in many ways really couldn't care less about history growing up.
Well, most of it's probably not even true anyway. But that's a separate topic. But it's true. I mean, I look at the pressure to perform in art class or. Right. It's like, man, your paper mache was terrible. Like who really cares about that long term? Not, throwing shade at any artists, but just as a concept, I know kids are wired differently.
Exactly.
To care about things, in certain areas and not have proclivity in other areas. So
let's rant about the public education system for like 2 hours because we could do it.
Well, we definitely could. Yeah. Well, that was an interesting thing too that wound up happening, and I'll talk more about that. But I wound up going to Lutheran school from 7th to 12th grade as a function of my mom looking at the public school system and being like, I don't want you in that anymore. Yeah. So that actually did come up in my story, but I mean, from my dad's perspective, I think it was him just trying to call out the best. And I'll give my dad a ton of credit in this, is that he did change a lot of, at least, I don't want to say generational, because I don't know so much about my great grandfather on his side, but there is a stark difference between my dad and his dad. I know for a fact his dad was physically abusive of him and my grandmother. He was verbally abusive. My dad used to tell me stories. He would roll them up in carpets. And by, not my grandmother, my dad. So he's still claustrophobic to this day. Like if he has to go get MRIs or CAT scans, or things like that, he really can't do it unless it's open. Because, I could imagine. He used to make them kneel on like beds of rice for like hours, to just, I guess, establish dominance in the house. Like when they would do something that he didn't agree with as a dad. So, comparatively to that, that's like tyrannical. And my dad, I did get physically disciplined by him a couple times. I remember that, but compared to that, nothing like it. And my dad always said, I want to be present and I don't want to repeat the mistakes that his dad made, I guess, right? And to a large degree, he did that. So that's why in adulthood, I can look back on our relationship, especially in those younger years, and be like, I understand, because he had one kid. He didn't have a wife in the house present, right, at that time too, like you're saying. And I've had the tendency plenty of times to snap on the girls when I have a long day or whatever. So that type of stuff, I think I understand, later on in life, when I started getting Christian counseling, though, the one thing that I had to do was actually acknowledge it and not sweep it under the rug. Because one of the questions that I think a lot of counselors will ask if they're a Christian is, have you forgiven your dad? Have you forgiven your mom? I was like, I don't really know that I need to forgive them for much. Like, yeah, I forgive them. They were humans. They had a past. You know, like, I love them. I love them. They did great with me, you know, blah, 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 right? And she's like, yeah, but that's just like total codependent behavior, right? That you can't even acknowledge that your dad may have hurt you in certain ways, or your mom may have, you know, hurt you in certain ways and contributed to the things that you're going through as an adult. So I had to come to grips with that. And I think I've told you this, but as my dad moved away when I was, you know, in adulthood, he moved to another state, and I wrote him a letter actually of some of these things just to address it, right? Just to get it out there. And I think that was the best thing that I could do too. So he knew how I was feeling about some stuff. So yeah, that dad's house on the outside looked, you know, really great, right? But inside there was a lot of that dynamic of perfection needing to be, and it, again, rooted in good things. But for me, it built in that mechanism that I need to perform for love, and not saying that was the case. I knew he loved me no matter what, but at the end of the day, I know you could appreciate this from your story too, that you shared, like, that carries into adulthood too, and into your walk with God, right? Where it's like, you are my first father figure, right? An image of God on earth, and I have to perform for praise,
right?
Or whatever the case is.
It's so clear. Like, this is why we have to study childhood and study parents, because it's the whole nature nurture thing.
Yep.
And nature will never be predominant. Like, nurture is always going to take over, because your environment is going to dictate. Like, you're just trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
And in your case, man, I see, like the poverty mindset over here, and then I see the performance mindset over here, and it's like, oh, you literally grew up in two homes that fed those narratives. So it makes sense. You are the product of that. And now, you know, I think a lot of people will say, like, oh, why do you guys talk about trauma so much? And why are you so focused? Because we have to be renewed by the transforming of our mind, or transformed by the renewing of our mind, right? So we've got to look at these patterns. And so when I'm hearing your story, it's just so cool to see you confronting that stuff.
Yeah.
Because you could have easily just brushed it under the rug and been like, nah, childhood was all right. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't have any complaints.
Yeah.
But now you're studying this stuff so that you can create a better environment for your daughters and your wife.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard it said in church, like, God can heal what you won't reveal. And that speaks a lot to, like, confession and, you know, getting counseling. But I also think the same can be said, like, God can heal what's not revealed. And if you don't dig into the traumas and the things that have happened, like, you're lacking revelation personally.
Yeah.
And God can't heal that, because how can he go on a journey with you you're not willing to go on?
Yeah.
Right. So we do have a part in that. And I wrestled with that too. It's like, we talk, you know, in this triangle, and we just kind of dump all these things out. And that's why I called my dad before this. I called my mom, and I was like, listen, I need to talk about some of the real stuff, but I also hope I do just as good a job of highlighting the love and the care, and, you know, that you both were present and of taking great things. So I don't want people listening to any of our stories or any of the episodes to go, well, I just have to focus on the negative.
Right.
You know, or it's okay to focus on the negative. It's not that, but it does have to be addressed to be able to, you know, get healing and freedom from it.
Well, I mean, the whole point of Act Like Men is that's an active charge. It's a command of go do, act, right? Act is an action. And so, you know, us talking about our stories and stuff, it can feel a little mopey and so reflective, but it's like, we're about to get into some very practical, tangible stuff. And it's like, cool, what do we do about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But to know where you come from, the baggage and the trauma, it's helpful. Because it helps us understand where we start.
Well, there's a couple of different aspects. One is that for somebody who doesn't have a role model to help call them up or a mentor, like, well, if this guy can do it, then I can do it.
Yeah.
If this guy overcame all of that stuff, then maybe I can be inspired to overcome as well.
Yeah.
You know, but then there's that aspect to what you said about renewing your mind. Well, how are you, you know, yes, our minds are being renewed by the scripture, but it's being renewed from what?
Right.
Right? It's that aspect of, well, what was that fleshly pattern
Yep.
that was instilled in me, whether that be a poverty mentality, a performance mentality, a slavish mentality, whatever those are, right? Where those are skewed and have to be renewed into areas of sonship and love and acceptance and a life of grace and mercy instead of performance and justice and this hard line of everything. So, I mean, because when I hear your story, I'm hearing on your mom's side, there was this poverty mentality, but there was also love and acceptance.
Yeah.
On your dad's side, there was provision, but there wasn't as much acceptance because there was so much performance in there. So there's like really good positives on both sides and some, impacting negatives as well.
Yeah.
And you're not just, well, we're just going to look at all the negative stuff. You're talking about the positive stuff too.
Yeah.
But it's the negative stuff that has to be overcome.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And I think where, you and I are at the age, and Steve's definitely at the age.
He's past the age.
Where, if I'm an 18-year-old guy and I'm walking around church or what have you, it's very easy to look at us with our families and you see Steve pull up in his nice car and, we have like our clothes that we've been able to buy because we have some, financial stuff, right? And you might be in a baggy t-shirts and shorts that were handed down from your older brother or what have you, right? And look at those guys, quote unquote, and be like, they're great. They're perfect. They have a great life, right? Like they haven't gone through anything that I've gone through or understand what I'm going through now. So, that's why we talk about the things that we talk about too. So it is important, to go through for sure. And, I'm glad we get a chance to do this, but.
Okay. So childhood, home is established. You've established that narrative now.
So here's where things got kind of, a little wonky for me is number one, my mom remarried and dad, I want to say maybe I was like 10 or 11, I think somewhere in there. I could be slightly off on that. But that just introduced like a whole dynamic that I was never, you're not prepared to have two dads, right? Essentially. And this was not a story. My life was not a story of my dad was gone, right? He was, I saw him every other day of my life. Yeah. So it was very interesting now having a stepdad in the house and, another male role model. Now he was someone my mom met in the Lutheran church that we went to. So he was a believer. But it was still just, that awkward feeling out stage for a long time. And one of the things that I've noticed about my personality and my temperament, even after counseling was pointed out to me, is that like, if you tell me to do something or even just suggest it strongly, I automatically want to do the opposite of what you told me by nature, because I, in temperament, am basically someone that does not want to be controlled at all. And I also don't want to control other people. So sometimes you have those like leadership figures that are like, don't control me and I want to be the general. That's not necessarily me, but I like my control of myself. And maybe that's because I grew up in a house or two houses where I feel like I did not have control.
Yeah, I was about to say that autonomy is valuable to you.
100%.
It's security that you didn't have.
Yeah. So, now you're introducing another guy who has, his own beliefs and things. And he wound up being a great guy, still to this day. Like I was on the phone with him last week and, he's helped us out financially in our marriage. He's, did anything medical that we need. Like he wound up being a great guy. But at the same token, I did see a lot of dysfunction between him and my mom as well, because number one, I know she was not healed from the marriages, and also he had been divorced in the past as well. So now I had a step sibling also who was not with us all the time in the house, but still, a new dynamic. And then on my dad's side, he started dating and had a long-term girlfriend that went south down the line, and then he wound up getting remarried. So now I have another, woman figure in my life. Now this is when I was older. So now I'm in those teen years and stuff, and how teenage boys are, right? Like can't tell us anything and what have you. So I always think I was, respectful to the degree that I could, but you're just coexisting with people who you just never planned for, if that makes sense. And I love my stepmom to death as well. She's awesome. But it was just so much change and new dynamics constantly, and going through that. So things did change for me, though, in 7th grade. That's when I went to the Lutheran school for the first time. So just blew up my friend group from public schools, essentially, and, had to redo that. It was a unique dynamic where I went from a class of public school was probably like 30 kids, and my graduating class would have been probably, I think, 1,200 kids, right? Like if I went all the way through high school, so it was a big public school district, to my entire school at the Lutheran church had, I think it was 150 kids, K-12. So my grade had 18 kids in it, I think. And we went to all the same classes together by and large. So it was a huge transition, dress code, the whole nine. And now we're doing chapel on Wednesdays. That was like not a thing, for me prior to that. Now, we had started going to that church. So I would say I was like Christian-ish, right? Like, your parents' faith, they're bringing me to, my mom is bringing me to church all the time. But I don't know that I would have necessarily said I was saved. Although I think I did kind of understand, like, there's God and God's with us, but my walk wasn't my own yet, if that makes sense.
I mean, I don't know at that age, like if you're at the age of, what do they call it? Accountability or whatever. So
exactly. Yeah. But going to school there also kind of fed that performance mentality of, if your shirt was sticking out of your sweater, like you're going to get a pink slip for that. If you're acting a certain way, like you couldn't have your hair a certain way or whatever. So then I think I started kind of conflating religious activity with God. Right?
Yeah, man. Oh, that's a whole combo.
And academic performance and things like that. So I very, very distinctly remember in those years, like, more of like God is the one waiting to throw a lightning bolt at you kind of feeling. But I also did have the chance to be in Bible class and things like that. So that was the first exposure that I got to things like apologetics and defending faith. So I knew it wasn't nonsense. I just think I had more of that, again, like Zeus kind of lording over you kind of feeling of God, if that makes sense. And as I was growing through those years, now I was getting exposure to women, wanting to like be involved with women. And that was just like a shark fight, basically, because we had so few girls in the school, Now, mind you, we also had, this was kind of a cool part. I went to a school where we brought in international athletes. So I was walking around in the hallway with a ton of guys that were from Africa that were like 7.5 feet tall, literally. And then I had guys that I wound up being friends with too, from DR, from Serbia, from Hungary, that, people came over to play basketball or play soccer or what have you. So it was now exposure to new ways of thinking, but trying to fit in different ways. And I remember always being into sports. That was a thing that just carried with me all the way through my adulthood, really. But getting into like varsity teams very young, I also got made fun of a ton because I was scrawny. I didn't develop till like much later in life, I would say. I look back at my pictures and I'm like literally a stick, wearing, well, I don't know if this is the right term to say, but wife beaters, whatever, like that, are just super baggy on me. So, I was great for my age at sports that I played, but compared to guys that were 4 or 5 years older than me, right, it was just, there was nothing there. So I remember being in the locker room and like, just literal, the whole group of guys just making fun of me for things. One of the kids actually hit me with a belt, like put me in a corner and was just like belting me, just like making fun of me, things like that. Those type of things stuck with me because I remember always feeling like I want to be on the in circle. Right. And then as I got older and became, vice captain or captain of a team, I had the tendency to then bully kids. And what the problem was is that I was very sharp intellectually because this is before.
You're gifted, we know.
the stress of life, and, you know, I'm just going to roll straight through that. But, you know, the stress of life and damaging my brain, which we'll talk about later. So I was extremely sarcastic. And I remember just like looking back after going through counseling and stuff, and some of the conversations that I had with people in like middle school and high school. And I actually like sent apology messages on Facebook because I felt so bad about some of the things that I had said to people.
Wow.
And did, because it was, I just was always in defense mode, you know, of like, if you said anything to me, you're directly coming after my character or my image that I was trying to build. Like I was going to just torch you to make fun, get the best of you before I got exposed, you know, for being insecure or whatever.
Right.
And it's the typical, you know, I wasn't like a physical bully. I hated that. But intellectually, a lot of times I think I tried to establish dominance over boys, girls, whatever it was. Like if you made fun of me, you were on my list, you know, if that made sense. So I had to work through a lot of that as it went. But that desire for acceptance, that followed me. So what happened, I think we spoke about this at a point, but right before I went off into college, my dad got into a very serious car accident, like a block or two away from our house, with my grandmother in the car. They got just T-boned by a pizza delivery driver, and he wound up going to the hospital. And I think simultaneously, if I'm remembering it correctly, his gallbladder started failing as well, like around that time. So it was two kind of things that were happening at the same time, where now, you know, his spine was physically messed up. Like I remember him being in a neck brace. He eventually had to get surgery for his spine and stuff like that. And then also that was happening where he was very sick. Again, I think it was because of the gallbladder. And the short version of it is, I think that was the reconnection point for my dad to God, because I know he grew up with a Catholic background. And I think he was even like an altar boy and, you know, serving and services and things like that. You know, I know he did his communion and all that type of stuff, but he just was not getting better at any point. And the assistant pastor at the Lutheran church that I went to, he was a kind of rough and tumble guy, big weightlifter, postmaster, you know, just like a guy's guy. And the few times that my dad had come to either church service or something like a school event and connected with that guy, his name was Gary, I could see there was like kind of a kindred spirit, because that's like the life that assistant pastor came out of, right? Oh, by the way, if you see my dad, you would never know we were related, probably, as far as like first glance.
Your beard is 1/4 the length of his.
And most of my life I didn't have the beard too, and I was dressing in suit and tie for work. So my dad, you know, has a beard down to here, you know.
Man,
and
I'm trying to catch up over here.
You're getting there.
To catch up. It's gonna take me a couple weeks.
I leave it, please leave it. We'll convince Rachel. But you know, my dad was a Navy guy. He's a biker. He has probably 15 to 20 tattoos on him. You know, he's got the number 13.
Classic, like Harley Davidson.
100%. You know, would give you the shirt off his back, and we used to make fun of him because my friends would come over at the house and he would like bake brownies and cookies and stuff for us. You know, so it was just like so funny. He was a very kind guy.
Moments, apparently,
yeah. I learned a ton of things about like respect and taking care of people from my dad too. But outside, you would not ever look at that guy and be like, "Let me go have a conversation with him."
He makes brownies.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of lost the train of where I was going there.
Well, so you were just talking about kind of like middle school, high school, getting made fun of a little bit.
Anyway, sorry. So to paint a picture of my dad, that's what I mean, why he connected with that assistant pastor. So anyway, that guy wound up coming to the house and praying for him. And I think that was like a reignition of my dad's faith, because he realized, like, I think he was really actually close to dying in the car accident. And then, you know, all the stuff that happened afterward. But while that was all going on, it was my time to choose college. And I didn't want to go far from him. So I wound up going to St. John's University, which is in Queens. I lived in Long Island, about an hour car ride. So I could go back home on weekends when I wanted to, and, you know, whatever the case is there. And that experience of going to a Catholic university wound up shaping me because, number one, when I was in religion classes that they had, there were a ton of people that went there because it was a good, quote unquote, Catholic education. But they were not there for the Catholic education. They were there because it had a good name. There was a lot of connection to New York City and good alumni network and things like that. And they might have been Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, atheist. And this is the first exposure that I'm getting to that as somewhat of an adult, because I went to middle school, high school with Christians for the most part.
Lutheran, yeah.
Yeah, Lutheran, Christian, or kids that at least their families were those things. So now I'm in these classes with people with different worldviews and world religion, and they're challenging the professor on his Catholic views. And I'm starting to think about it and go, there's a lot of credence to what they're saying. Yeah. Right? Like I remember one of the questions that people asked or brought up was like, well, if God is the first cause, we say that in apologetics, right? Like he's the uncaused cause or the unmoved mover.
Right.
Well, then that means he was also the first cause or the designer of sin. So it's like, well, then is God evil because there's sin in his character because he had the capacity to create people who sinned? And you sit and you think about that in your college brain, which is probably doped up or, whatever. And you're like, whoa, that makes a lot of sense. Right.
Yeah. Well, this is so important to call out. As fathers, we've got to lead and teach our children apologetics, because you can imagine you grew up sheltered kind of, right, in Lutheran bubbles, and you get to college and you hear like one objection that on the surface sounds very riveting and intellectual and challenging. But then when you actually like study apologetics, you're like, okay, there's an answer for that.
I'm not the first one to have this question.
Yeah. But most of us are reactive and we'll just let our kids passively go to college one day, but we never equipped them. And so I think as men, like we have to have actual curriculum around, and I don't know if you did this or not, this isn't a critique on you, but as a dad, I'm definitely going to put my kids through, little like pseudo apologetics training together and stuff.
Well, I mean, the Bible says like always be ready to defend your faith, right? Yeah. Like, so it's a charge to us to not just believe it, but to also be able to defend it, you know? And I think that's where a lot of our modern day Christian experience gets lost, right? Is like we talked about, people have kind of this puny interaction with God, where I think about back in the day, we were talking about Templars and crusades and stuff like that.
Before judges and...
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that's correct either, but there was like, we're going to war for the things that we believe in and defend it physically, right? Well, in today's day and age, we may be called to do that too, but we also have to be prepared to defend it
the
spiritually,
kingdom of God
mentally.
Is violence, and the violent take it
by force.
Take it by force.
The kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violent take it by force, and is the aspect of really pressing into the kingdom. But going back to your point on apologetics, I've told my kids for years, it's not just knowing what you believe, but why you believe it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why do you believe the Bible? Why do you believe this? And so on and so forth. So there's a whole, aspect of what you're talking about how I think statistically 80% of professing Christian kids who go to college walk away from their faith. That's an astronomical number, and I think it's due in large part to, a failure of preaching the gospel. And instead we preach a culturally relevant, watered down gospel that doesn't call people to repentance and faith in Christ alone. It's more of hey, you just live morally and you're going to be good. And it's not like that at all. You've got to put your faith in Christ and trust him for your salvation and let him transform who you are so that you can then be more like Christ in the way in which you live your life. And it's not just an intellectual assent. There's such an aspect of where belief has become construed into, well, yeah, I believe God, I believe in God.
Yeah.
But it's not this belief that is rooted in faith.
Right.
You know, because like it says in the book of James, the demons believe and they shudder.
Yeah.
Right? Faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
So there's
100%.
that. So what James is saying in that passage is like, faith without works is dead, and the demonic faith is better than your dead faith.
Wow.
Because those demons, in response to their faith, actually shudder, and you don't even do that.
Right.
Is that not like in Revelation when God says, you know, if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out? I'd rather you be hot or cold.
Right.
Right? Like that's our God.
Yeah.
Right. And the hot and cold, see, we look at hot and cold as, well, you always should be hot for God. No, it was this aspect, and I think it was in Ephesus that was written to the church in Ephesus. They had in Ephesus, whatever city that was written to, it was this aspect of they had cold springs and they had hot springs. And those had beneficial aspects that were unique to each other. So it was not, well, you should always be hot for God. No, there's this aspect of where the display of your faith should be positive, whether it's the benefit of a cold spring, you know, it's the benefit of a cold plunge,
Right.
or the benefit of a hot sauna.
Yeah.
You're being a
benefit from
benefit
both.
to the kingdom of God in your life, as opposed to being just a tub of warm water.
Right. And see, that's a perfect example of like, if you don't dive in on cultural things, historical things, like you would miss that whole message that's in the Bible. And that's an important thing, I think, for our listeners to remember, is the Bible was written to other people in a different time for them and for us. But culturally, it's important to understand that type of stuff, especially, you know, when we look at the Gospels, like Jesus is not speaking to Christians.
American Christians.
Right. Jesus is speaking to Jews who were farmers, who were poor in many cases, right? And understanding some of those cultural implications in society and how he uses specific parables, like you're unlocking depths of the faith.
So much depth.
Yeah, so much depth. I mean, that's why we'll obviously never understand 100% of it. But I think when you start to really lock into those things, you're like, whoa, the Bible is not this, like, that's one of the critiques of the Bible is like, oh, it's incoherent, there's contradictions, it's all these different books and what have you. It's like when you see the through line and the intentionality in scripture,
Insane.
why Jesus was where he was at certain times during certain festivals because of prophecy written 2,000 years before that, and examples he's using and all this stuff. I mean, you think of, not to go too far off of it, but you know, the ram that God sent Abraham, right, when he was supposed to sacrifice Isaac and getting caught in the thorn bush, like that's a detail that's written in there thousands of years before the Messiah would then go and have a crown of thorns on his head and be that sacrifice. So it's like, as I was learning that type of stuff, that really brought me into my personal walk. But that's a side note. I don't know. But anyway, to zoom back out quickly, because I know we're, you know, coming on time soon. When I got to college, it was that clash. And I think this is what we're talking about too, of like making sure that your kids have their own faith. It became that clash of new opinions and new worldviews, new religions around me, and also debauchery. Like that was the first time I was exposed. The worst thing I ever did up until high school was I smoked hookah, right? Like there was a hookah lounge we used to like go and use fake IDs to get into. Didn't touch a drug. I think I had drinks maybe towards the end of my senior year. Like I was pretty straight-laced in high school. That was the nature of the people we were around, and still having that kind of like religious aspect of my daily life. We were doing other things like, you know, sneaking into buildings and stuff, sneaking on rooftops, but none of that. But when I got to college is when I went off the deep end, because I was always searching for that validation. So within my first week of college, I helped in theft that I later got caught for. We stole an 18-pack of beer from a deli, and they traced back all the camera footage. So I got put on immediate probation from college. So within my first week, again, I'm already having to give a phone call home saying, hey, they might kick me out. The guy who I guess was processing my case or whatever, he's like, what was your major? And I had declared a Homeland Security major. And he's like, dude, you want to be in Homeland Security and you're stealing? And I didn't physically take the stuff, but I distracted the clerk. So I was
accomplished.
I was an accomplice. I was 100%. I was, an accomplice. I was a virgin up until college too, and that was by choice because that was what was being kind of preached to us and what have you. And then within the first 2 or 3 days, that was over.
Because he had a higher selection than he did when he was in the Lutheran high school.
Well, that is also part of
There were more than
the
4
truth.
girls.
There were more than 4 girls. Yes, for sure. But, that was a thing where I was in kind of a on again, off again relationship with the girl that I would say was probably like most popular in our grade. But I was always like trying to reach for her, if that made sense. Like we were there, but kind of not. And then she wound up falling in love with some guy she later got married to. So that was good that at least they stayed together. But I was always trying to prove myself as like worth the popular girl, if that makes sense, because of all the making fun of and things that happened. Sure. So when I got to college, I'm like, I'm going to just go for it. Like, there's nothing standing in my way now, and that's when I realized that my faith was not my own. So sex, wound up getting introduced to illegal substances for the first time. That was interesting. My roommate was from Seattle, one of them, and also the guy that lived across the hall. There's a very big drug culture on the West Coast. Oh yeah, as you probably know. So first exposure to that, smoking weed, doing other things. It was very wound up quickly going downhill. Now, I still had a great college experience. I graduated, I think it was 4th in my class. I had almost a perfect GPA, but behind the scenes, I was always trying to fill that void of acceptance. Right. So I was kind of friend to everyone, don't judge anyone. Especially, I think this is common when you start smoking weed. Love everyone, man. Like your walk is your walk and your journey, right?
I'm glad you found your path, bro.
Yeah, 100%. Now this is also me. I'm looking up at like the stars and, just having these deep intellectual thoughts. I know I look back on them. I'm like, that was so dumb what I was thinking, at that time. But that did progress too, because then what happened is I wound up moving into a house with my hallmate that was from Seattle, and he pledged a frat. I didn't pledge the same frat or any frat because I didn't want to get up early in the morning. But what wound up happening was I got to reap the benefits of him being there, and I wound up, I'll just fast forward to my senior year, living in his frat house with 5 of his brothers without being in the frat. But as you can imagine, in a frat house, it's crazy.
Sure. So
now that was, a ton of things going on every week, every weekday, every weekend. It was just, what could we do to just outpace each other? We had a tendency, for whatever reason, towards destroying things. So we used to drive around the neighborhood and go pick up people's garbage, like their old TVs and stuff. And we built out essentially like a rage room in our basement. We soundproofed the basement. My roommate was a DJ also, so that helped for parties. And we would just tape up big sheets on the floor and put glass things and stuff and just grab baseball bats and golf clubs and just smash the crap out of things, wasted, just for the fun of it, just being guys. So it was like that environment of like Animal House, I would imagine, would have been like that. And simultaneously, because I was in Queens, now I got exposure to New York City. And once we started getting into the club life, that's where things then started to really pick up, like substance usage, if you will. MDMA and cocaine and different things like that were always all around me. So that desire again to be accepted and, even further than being accepted, like getting into being like like an alpha male, right? Like I'm not afraid of anything. I'll do anything. If you do that, I'll do twice as much as you. You know how it is, right? Like
I'm glad we didn't meet before Christ.
we would have been dead, dude.
Yeah.
Honestly, I really think that.
Yeah.
I really, really do think that, because I did have that experience, right? Where kind of my culminating life story into my relationship with Christ is I went to Miami Ultra Music Festival. A lot of people may have heard of it, but it's just a huge rave, massive, like 15,000 people, I think, go. And I was super into EDM and dance music. And again, the club scene, that's where we were at. And wound up going with a few friends. One of the friends, quote unquote, air quotes, that was there, told me that he got some stuff from another guy, and this was his friend that he knew, and this was safe to take and what have you. And I wound up doing that, and come to find out later on, he just met the guy when he was there and was saying friend, like figuratively, essentially, or because they had a drug bonding experience, all of a sudden they were best friends.
Right.
I wound up getting so sick from that. It was the last day of the festival. We had my flight in the morning. I threw up, no joke, over 50 times. It was me, my ex-girlfriend at the time, and my roommate's ex-girlfriend. We were like, not to be graphic, but we were like round robin throwing up in the toilet. It was literally like, okay, you're done. Like, I have to go. So whatever we had was like extremely tainted.
Wow.
I guess. Yeah. Very dangerous. I was at that point where when we were going to shows, I didn't care, if I just met you and we were swapping bags of stuff, and it was just the culture.
Yeah.
It was the culture. So
I have a question. I have a question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
So you went from being this upstanding, moral, straight-laced kind of guy to an absolute out of control party animal within a very short period of time.
Yep.
What do you think was like the thing what would you attribute that to?
Acceptance.
It was all driven by acceptance.
I think so. Wow. Looking back on it, I really do think that was the thing, is because first of all, I found girls that, thought that type of behavior was great, right? Was cool. And, I don't know if we're going to get sued for copyright, but once you pop, the fun don't stop. You know what I'm saying? Is that Pringles, you think?
Bro, I don't know.
You have a taste, right? And all of a sudden you're just, you start to make all your decisions based on that.
Okay.
And then I found guys that was the fun, acceptable, cool guy thing to do. So it was just downhill. But again, on the outside, and when I was visiting home, you would never know that, ever. I mean, my grades were higher than they ever were. I always had that vision of, I don't want to be a failure, I think because of what my dad kind of instilled in me. So I knew, like, this is temporary, this is fun, but the fun almost cost me my life.
Yeah. No, that's so crazy to me, that was your thing.
Yeah.
Because acceptance was not a big aspect for me. I just kind of accepted that I was always going to be on the outside. There has never been a time in my life, in the 58 years that I've been alive, where I've been in the inner circle. I've always been on the outside. Always. And so the fact that it actually kind of makes me grateful that I never fought that hard to be in the inner circle, because the price that you ended up paying to be in the inner circle, because really the inner circle meant that high level of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, exactly. I've been accepted now. I mean, granted, for me, it was like, who did I become to get wherever it is you were trying to get to? Mm-hmm. I think we all have that in our story. I think that's true with most people, of where have we made the compromises? Where have we given up on, whether it's the vision of ourselves that we wanted to be, or we just don't know, and we're just making bad choice after bad choice after bad choice, because that is the tendency of our flesh.
For sure.
But the fact that acceptance was such a high motivator for you is, wow, that just lands kind of hard with me, of like, my goodness. Wow.
Well, even carrying into adulthood, like even today, I would say like my biggest battle that I face spiritually, I think, is fear of man.
Sure.
And I know that expresses itself in different ways. When I say that, people probably have different, like, I'm not physically afraid of men, like they're going to choke me out in a parking lot. Not that, but like acceptance of people. So like when you think about going to evangelize, how would that flavor that? Right? When you think about doing something like this, that was the first thing I thought in my head, is like, well, when I share this stuff, it's on the internet forever, right? What are people going to say that are in my family that are, never heard this stuff or what have you? Like, that is still my default tendency to go to acceptance mentality and need. Now, I know how to work through that more now, and obviously my relationship with God supersedes my relationship with men, but if I'm not plugged in, and I'm not walking in the Spirit and putting on, the armor every day, like that 100% is my default. I go back to that, and fear of like lack of resources are my two, things, which if you look at my two houses growing up, right, it was need for acceptance from dad and fear of finance, right, and provision on my mom's side. So, it sticks there. I'm still working through some of that stuff as well. But yeah, the acceptance factor was, it's a terrible thing to finally make it where you want to go. And I think you said the same thing, right? Like you get in those circles and then you realize like, this sucks,
Yeah.
after a while.
It's literally like a toilet swirl just going down.
Yeah.
And you're looking at each other. Like our group started as probably 20 people, high school parties, whatever. And then it was like eventually me and one other dude sitting in a basement, like picking weed up off the carpet, trying to stuff it in our little pipe. And we're like, this is life?
Yeah.
Like what?
We lost one of our friends to a heroin overdose. That was absolutely crazy. Stuff like that, started to really flavor my thoughts. And then leading into that event, that's where that night that we were in Miami, and after I was like so sick and everything, I had to get back home. Luckily, the same friend that got us that stuff, he was sober enough, ironically, to book our return flight home, or like check us in. Got to the airport, it was me and my ex-girlfriend, and dying, like literally lights feeling like they were going out, dying type of stuff. I made it through security. I don't know how I made it through the first flight, but we had a layover in Atlanta from Miami, and I just told her, like, I'm going to the corner, and I think this is it. Like, I really, really felt like my lights were going out. Probably because I had just lost no electrolytes, and
you're severely dehydrated.
Did not sleep for, literally at this point, probably 48 hours, because we just were partying the whole time we were there. And I remember really seeing like the light kind of close out, to the point where I called my housemate, who became, my roommate, and he was my best friend at that time. And I was like, dude, I'm not going to make it, man. I just want to say goodbye, all that type of stuff. And as I was laying there on the floor, I was thinking like, wow, my parents are going to find me. Well, they're going to find out news of that I died, probably from someone in the Atlanta General Hospital that calls them, or their police department, because they're going to wheel me out of this airport dead. And all the sacrifice, all the things that they put into me, all of that was literally going to be for nothing. And that's kind of where I started to make that, plea, right? Like, God, if you can get me out of this, then I think it's time to start changing. And it wasn't like, dear Jesus, you are Lord. And, like you had a very direct experience of like, I love you, Jack. Like, you're my son. Like, I didn't have that, but I had like the, oh crap moment of like, uh-oh. I think I need to start changing if I get out of this. So long story short, we made it home, and I had to go to work the next day. That was an interesting shift. I had a morning shift. I was a loss prevention agent in Manhattan at that point. So
Bro, you should not be in loss prevention. You're the one stealing stuff.
I was back in the day. Yeah. That's ironic, but yeah, I did make it through. But I started changing from that point. You know, it wasn't immediate. I think there were a couple other times after that where I did party and stuff. But for me, that was definitely a diminishing trail. And what wound up happening, because of that fear of finance, I think it motivated me to start looking into ways to not wind up poor. Started being on YouTube all the time. And, you know, this is when really YouTube started booming as far as like influencers and people putting content on there, Gary Vee and Tony Robbins and that type of stuff, and coaching programs and things. And that appealed to me. So it became, all right, how do I make it out of the poverty mentality and the generational kind of situations that we've been in? Wind up meeting someone from elementary school that I had lost contact with. I met him in the gym, just happenstance. We ran into each other. I always joke he was short. I'm like, dude, you're the guy from elementary school. And I would always bust his chops that he didn't grow much, so he looked exactly the same. He was part of what I found out to be like a network marketing organization. I wound up getting involved in that, learning sales skills, and started being in an environment with people who I later found out were believers. People that were like really living out their walk. And when I was around them, I mean, these people had literally every financial comfort you could think of, every possession. I mean, you know, Maseratis, Ferraris, homes in Long Island that were $2-3 million homes on the water. The suits, man, I remember never wanting to be in a suit. And I remember this one guy came in his, you know, custom Italian pinstripe suit and the shoes that were probably like $500-600. I was like, I want to be like that. That is like the pinnacle of success. Well, come to find out, the closer and closer I got to them, that they were really successful because in network marketing, it's a people-based business. So if you don't prioritize people, right, you're going to lose your team and lose your profit and the whole nine. And that does happen, unfortunately, in that industry a lot. But this group was really rooted in their faith, and they had this kind of like para Bible study, like you could attend if you want to on Sunday morning. So I started going to that, kind of reclaiming faith and wrestling with that. And there were a group of guys that would leave there early and go to a new church that popped up on Long Island, about 10 minutes away. And I was looking for a home church at that point. I went to a seeker-sensitive kind of church and was like, all right, this is good, but felt that call for depth. So these guys kept leaving, and I was like, where are you going? And they're like, oh, we're going to this church. It's called V1. It's brand new. The guy's from Indiana, and like crazy stuff is happening over there. Like, you should just come check it out. And wound up going there. And, you know, for people watching, they may know Pastor Mike Signorelli. He was the pastor all the way back, you know, at the beginning of V1. There was probably 30 people there meeting in a movie theater, a Regal movie theater at that point. I walked into the service that they were having. So total, first of all, culture shock, never been to a movie theater for church. And this guy who is, you know, both sleeves in a t-shirt. When I say both sleeves, both arms fully tattooed, full sleeves, t-shirt, chain, buzz cut, right? Like, just total different experience than what I had ever seen in a pastor. And he is just going in about like King Saul and David. And it was Father's Day that I went, I believe, on the first time, or Father's Day was coming up that week. And he was just talking about how God was a father to both of them, but only one son chose to engage in that relationship and follow his ways. And it's so like corny, I guess, I don't know if it's the right word, but you hear churches say like, welcome home. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, I'm home, you know, like this is something different. And to just give the testimony part of that, I wound up fully giving my life to Christ and started seeing the things that were actually in the Bible in our church. So people were now starting to get delivered of demons. People were speaking in tongues. People were getting healed. Like, every week stories of this stuff happening tangibly. And I had never been exposed to any of that growing up in the Lutheran church, you know? And I'm not saying that's the position that every Lutheran takes, that those things aren't happening today. But it certainly was not talked about or seen in the church that I was going to. Right. So now I went from radical, wild life of partying and drug use and stuff like that to radical Christianity, right? Where it was, we're going to be out in the streets, like we're going to go confront evil spirits. We're going to go, you know, look to pursue power of the kingdom, right? And that was such a different walk with God than it was prior to, you know, and I started seeing the attendance kind of grow and grow and grow. And I'm not saying, for critics who will say this in the comments, like, I know church success cannot be measured just by numbers, because we have a lot of mega churches today that will preach the most dead gospel in the world,
or
right?
Pastors are falling.
Yeah. People are, you know, involved in scams and things, you know, financial fraud in churches, all this type of stuff. So attendance doesn't mean your church is killing it. But what I saw was a lot of people genuinely giving their life to God and seeing fruit that remained in their life over and over and over again as the years went by. Just to give a quick example of that, you know, my mom's pastor, his wife, they were going to also, I think, a Lutheran church, but different church than we grew up in. She had stage 4 cancer, and my mom asked me to come one Good Friday to her prayer healing service. It was like a combo Good Friday, and, you know, we're believing for healing for her on Good Friday, right? And I was like, okay, I don't really want to be away from the church, because I was very involved in the production team and things like that. And we were having Good Friday service, but I'll think about it. And that was one of the first times I really felt like I don't want to say an audible voice of God, but a very tangible impression, almost like it was a direct voice, right? To fast and go and pray for this woman, and she was going to be healed. It wasn't like, you know, fast and pray and maybe I'll do something. It was, Dillon, go fast, pray, and I will heal her.
Wow.
Oh.
So I walked in to the service after having fasted 24 hours and walked up to her and I said, hi, my name is Dillon. I go to this church, and I've been learning all about how, you know, the power of God is still for today. And I've seen crazy things happen and miracles and healings and what have you. And God told me to fast and pray for you, and you're going to be healed. And she was like, oh, okay. You know, like I probably skeptical, but kind of hopeful. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I laid hands on her, and I'm not saying it was just me. I think maybe God was using that directness of speech to highlight what her church body was doing, because I know they were all kind of in that, right? But given her the confirmation that it was going to happen, she was due for a procedure to kind of confirm that she needed the neck surgery, but she already knew that the cancer was stage 4. I believe it was ovarian, so very far advanced. And she went to that scan, and all the cancer was gone. And that was like 2 or 3 days later.
Come on.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That'll
that
build
was
your faith.
Yeah, that was a faith builder. Right. So, you know, things like that have marked me now to understand that, like, the walk with God is not what we'll talk about this as a theme throughout all of our episodes, I'm sure, but is not necessarily what we were taught in mass in modern day American Christianity. Like, we hear stories of people in Africa where God is still raising the dead. Why? Because they believe it.
Yeah.
Because they're proclaiming that it could happen. They're actively moving in that type of stuff. You know, we hear the miracles of, like, the underground church in China and how God is providing for them and, you know, providing safety and provision and resources. Why? Because they know that it's possible and they walk in it. You know, and that's the encouragement that I would give people. My testimony is that I was walking in a religious experience that I barely owned for myself, and went the way of the world and did all of the things that could get you killed and could get you, you know, acceptance or whatever you want to call it, popularity or what have you. And none of that really mattered. Like, it was all empty. I still wanted that gap filled, and the acceptance that I was searching for, I now know, was the relationship with my Heavenly Father and with Christ, right? So the Christian experience, I think, is a messy one. You know, like, all of the things that have happened since then in life have been faith builders, and there's been times even after that I've like sincerely doubted God, sincerely doubted, like, again, am I on the right path, you know, or what have you? So I think for our audience, it's like, okay to know that even once you start a relationship with Christ, it's not like a straight line A to B.
No.
You know, you're just sanctified all of a sudden. Your salvation, of course, is going to happen in that moment of acceptance, but like your sanctification process and undoing all of the generational things that are in your bloodline and undoing all the things that you caused to yourself and to people around you, that takes time. You know,
in many cases, it's harder because you're no longer on the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
You're literally going the opposite direction of everyone else in your life.
Yeah.
Every thought pattern, cultural pattern, it's harder, but the difference is you have this peace that surpasses understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, you're not alone through the journey, you know, and it's not how well you perform, how much of, you know, how many times you've done communion or how many times you prayed this week or what have you, you know, you're just accepted. And that's a real tough thing for people to latch onto.
It's hard to receive.
It's very hard.
Especially,
you know?
like us, I think all three of us in different ways were performers.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Very performance minded. And that's so hard to actually sit in, to let God love me.
Yeah.
Is so hard.
It is like an incomprehensible thing to a large degree to think that, I guess to say it this way, like we say God, but like if you think of for a second, like if people need to flip their brain to thinking of a God, like they're the idea of like a Zeus or like a, you know, Allah or whoever, you could never conceptualize that God coming, number one, loving you, getting beaten literally to death for you, just so you can have an experience or a relationship and an existence with him forever and be in right standing. Like we could never see that happening with any other God figure, you know, that we have knowledge of. So it's just really wild to know. And like, that's why I think we're all going through that stages, even in our walk now, of really metabolizing that and understanding and living in that walk. Like, wow, God, you did that for me, specifically for me and for the world, but for me. And like, that changes literally everything about how you live your life.
Yeah.
You know,
I think of Sodom and Gomorrah, where Abraham is just pleading with God, like, even if there's 100 righteous, 50, and he gets all the way down to one, right?
Yep.
And he's like, even if there's just one, and God's like, okay, I'll allow it. And that's the heart of God. He's like, even if in this exchange I got one person back, it was worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that, you know, we have songs that talk about God leaving the 99 for the one. But that's like a crazy concept. I mean, that really is a wild when you think of that. Like, we would never, ever do that as rational people, like leave all of my flock and my wealth and my provision and, you know, what I'm going to feed my family and go chase after this one knucklehead
that doesn't even want to be there.
That doesn't want to be there. Right. You know, it's like such a scandalous message. It really is. You know, so if anything, I hope that our 3 testimonies just give people hope. You know, and I do want to say on the back end of all of this, you know, I've had now the blessing of being married for 5 years, you know, and having an amazing wife that has loved me through the process of sanctification. In the transition down here to Florida, you know, we went through that leaving V1 physically, although, you know, I still watch their services a lot of times and things like that. And I love Pastor Mike to death. But, you know, finding that new home community, God just wove our lives together. And I know we want to talk about that more in depth in another episode, but it's been really beautiful to have a group of men around us, you know, that in those times where like I'm in fear or I'm in perversion. You could probably even.
All right, start recording. Okay, we're good. Let me go back to you. All right, you're good to jump in.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, point being, basically, community is everything, right? And that's what we are hoping to convey, you know, to our audience, right? That the community of men is going to bring you to a place that you haven't been before, and that's exciting, and it's tough and it's challenging, but you know, praise God, things have been so good. And I was just thinking about this too. I want to wrap up saying that my you need
Where's your mic?
Steve's just taking it in. But yeah, the relationship with my family, my parents, things have come so far full circle to.
That was hilarious.
I think we should just leave this.
We are.
Yeah.
Full circle, family.
Authenticity, guys, you know. But yeah, my dad and I are, you know, much closer today. You know, I talk with him every week. My mom, I talk with her multiple times a week, probably at this point. So, Jack can't look at you.
Jack has just completely lost his mind over there.
It's all good.
Oh, man.
Trying to listen and
that's
be
good.
serious. I can't.
That's good. Take
All
it.
right,
It's a good way to end
Keep
it.
going.
That's it, guys. I mean, that's it. God's good. I got a good family. You guys are great. Thank you. We love the audience. Like, we appreciate it. Jack's got a good smile. And I think, you know, we're in a good spot to wrap it up. So thanks for listening, yo.
Cool. Thank you for sharing, man. Really appreciate it.
I don't know how to end this after that.
I'm sorry.
That's like the worst.
I think I'm delirious right now.
That's probably, it's because you've been going to bed so late.
Oh, man.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, so let's do this. So, Dillon, what would you... So, to our listeners who have made it to the end of your story.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What would be the one thought you want them to leave this podcast with?
That there is hope for a jacket out of the room.
You're going to have to cut this and edit this because we can cut...
I kind of
I'm using
honestly,
my mic now, Jack.
I don't even want to edit it out, to be honest. This is great.
All right.
Nobody's going to leave this in. I'm just saying.
That was a great question, Steve.
We need to wait for Jack to
No, you're
regain
good.
his composure because we're never going to, because you still got to film your trailer.
Right.
And you're not going to get through that with him laughing.
All right, go for it.
Not. You're going to laugh knowing that you're inside the hoodie. Now you look like an emo, Jack.
They got to fix your hair.
Please, you're going to freak Steve out about the hair, man. Come on. You need to think of something sad. I don't want to bring you there.
All right,
Oh, my
go. We're good. I'm going to be in so much trouble for being late.
Yes, you are.
Man. Yes.
All right, go.
Let's put the fear of Rachel in your heart.
Yeah, really. Because we got to wrap this up. So
I know.
Okay.
What was the question?
Do you want to do the whole thing?
Sure.
Just ask the question.
So, Dillon, for the listeners who have made it to the end of the podcast, what would be your one thought, your one thing that you want them to leave this podcast with?
Yeah, I would just say that there's hope of having a great, fulfilled life with God, and that if you're striving for acceptance from other guys or women or, you know, the parent that wasn't there for you or whatever it might be, you're never going to fill that hole with people, right? People are great to have in our life and they're a vital part of our journey, but we were made for a relationship with our Creator, and it's only until I entered into that proper alignment with God that I started finding any peace in my life. So whatever it takes, I would recommend that people dig into the messy stuff with God. And whatever happens in that journey, he's going to have his hand of protection on you because he desires that relationship with you more than you desire it with him. And we know that because he came after us while we were still sinners. So there's a lot of blessing in your story left to come, but you got to do the work to go through a lot of this and unpack and heal and grow and what have you. But it's possible, and God's got the best plan for you. So yeah, I appreciate everyone listening, and hopefully we get into even more of our background as we're talking about other topics and things, because I know we all got a ton to go through. But once again, if you guys find this valuable, if you don't mind sharing this out and sending it to a brother that you think would benefit from this, that is our goal. We want to impact as many hearts for the kingdom as we can and really help to rebuild masculinity in today's world. So we love you guys, and we're excited for next week. Stay tuned.